Have you ever imagined walking into a place you built yourself and being treated like a nuisance? Sounds surreal, right? But it happens more often than you think. And it happened to Clara, a woman who built, brick by brick, the empire so many admire today. But on that day, she walked through the front door just like any ordinary person, worn-out backpack, messy tied-up hair, and clothes that didn't draw attention. That was intentional. It was a test. The store looked beautiful. Clara looked around with the eyes of someone who recognized every detail: the display layout, the choice of racks, the ambient soundtrack. But what stood out to her the most wasn't the decor. It was the service, or rather, the lack of it. Not a single saleswoman approached. Some gave her sideways glances, others whispered to one another, and one, more direct, offered a cold smile and said, "The sale section is in the back, okay?" Clara simply nodded and kept walking through the store that, years ago, was just a dream on paper. This isn't just another one of those stories of silent prejudice hidden behind a counter. This is a warning disguised as an opportunity, and that's exactly what Clara understood. As she walked between hangers and tags, she wasn't just thinking about how she had been treated. She thought about how many people had gone through the same thing, how many talents had been overlooked, how many customers turned away, how many chances for real human connection were lost due to shallow visual judgment. Because some people still believe that clothes define character, that a good customer is one who looks wealthy, that an engaged employee must have a presence. But Clara, invisible to her own team's eyes, proved the opposite. That true greatness lies in attentive eyes, active listening, and respect for those who walk in quietly. That afternoon, she didn't say who she was, didn't introduce herself, didn't assert authority. She just observed, took notes, names, behaviors, attitudes, recorded every detail, and left the same way she came in, silently. But she didn't leave lighthearted. She left with resolve, because that moment marked the start of a shift, a movement. Days later, she called a meeting with the regional leaders, an in-person meeting with no prior notice. She made sure it was held at the very store where the incident had taken place, and then she walked in, this time dressed in the elegant style she usually wore to corporate events: firm heels, tailored blazer, serious gaze. Everyone stood up. And it was then that the same employees who had ignored Clara in the store recognized her. The discomfort was instant, but Clara didn't raise her voice. She simply asked them to sit down. She began by sharing her journey, from when she used to sell clothes from the trunk of her car to opening her first physical store. She spoke of sleepless nights, risky investments, and lessons learned from failure. Then she said, "The store you ignored, I created it, and the respect you denied was meant for me. But it could have been for anyone, and that's the problem." The silence in the room was thick. Some tried to hide their embarrassment, others just stared at the floor. Clara wasn't there to humiliate. She was there to teach, because stories like this, though painful, have transformative power when told right. And she made sure to show that this wasn't just about her, it was about an entire culture that needed to be reevaluated. She proposed something bold, an internal active listening program where employees would be invited to share their own stories of judgment and resilience. A human-centered service committee was formed, led by those who had once felt ignored themselves. And gradually, the stores in the network began to change. More than just selling clothes, they began valuing connection, real exchange, people seeing people. The results came quickly. Customers returned. The brand's reputation grew stronger. And within the teams, new leaders began to emerge. Not chosen for their outfits, but for the empathy in their eyes. Clara realized then the power of turning a mistake into a revolution. This is one of those stories that leave a mark, because it shows the problem isn't making mistakes, it's not learning from them. And that true luxury isn't in the price of the clothes, but in how we treat every person who crosses our path. So now I ask you, how many times have you judged someone based on appearance? How many opportunities slipped away because you chose not to listen, not to truly look, not to care? The truth is, these stories aren't exceptions. They happen every day, maybe even in your own workplace. But now that you know, what will you do differently? Do you have the courage to apply this where you are? To spark a quiet but powerful change? To listen more, judge less, and lead with purpose? Because the difference between a toxic and a human-centered environment begins with how we treat those we see as unimportant. And maybe, just maybe, the person you're underestimating today is the one who will teach you the most tomorrow. If this story resonated with you, if it made you reflect or stirred a memory, don't let that lesson fade. Subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and share this video with someone who needs to rethink how they treat others. Here, we'll keep bringing stories that challenge, inspire, and prove that, in the end, what really matters is the essence. She walked in as if she wanted nothing. Simple clothes, an old backpack on her shoulders, and a calm smile on her face. No badge, no announcement, just presence. And even as the CEO of the entire brand, Clara experienced firsthand what many customers face every day: indifference disguised as neutrality. That store, born from her own effort, now treated her like just one more among the crowd. The saleswomen, unaware of who she was, pushed promotions as if they were unloading leftovers. They avoided eye contact, spoke with disdain, and only smiled when the reflection in the glass showed someone more interesting. That cold, mechanical service revealed far more than just lack of training. It revealed the absence of human stories in that space. And Clara, standing there, watched it all like someone flipping through a chapter she had once written, but now seemed erased. This kind of situation doesn't just happen to disguised CEOs. How many times has someone walked into a room and been judged by what they wore before saying a single word? The truth is, prejudice moves fast. It strikes before speech. And that's why stories like this must be told, must be given voice. And Clara knew that behind that experience was a rare opportunity to teach, without raising her voice. The wrinkled dress Clara wore hid more than fabric. It hid a whole journey. It wasn't carelessness, it was intentional. Years ago, she had to step away from her own company for personal reasons, and now, as the head of international expansion, she had decided to revisit her roots. But not with spotlights or fanfare. She wanted to see up close, to feel in her own skin, if the soul of the brand still lived in that store. And that's why she didn't announce her arrival. No security, no forewarning. She wanted to find out how the staff treated the anonymous. This kind of attitude, by the way, is a powerful strategy many leaders overlook. Visiting the ground level in disguise is like hearing the truth without filters. And the truth, as Clara quickly learned, was far from what the reports said. There's a deep lesson here. Sometimes the best way to test what we've built is to return as if we weren't the creators. How many success stories were lost because their founders were trapped in ego? Not Clara. She traded her heels for sandals, her designer bag for a worn-out backpack, and took the first step toward a transformation that didn't even have a name yet. For 60 minutes, Clara spoke only when needed. She sat, walked between racks, watched customer interactions, listened to snide remarks, and noted everything. It was like a live documentary, just without visible cameras. Every action revealed more about the store's culture than any executive meeting ever could. And the most shocking part? It wasn't an isolated case. It was the norm. No one asked her name. No one truly offered help. The sales assistant's expressions only changed when they saw someone who looked appropriate enough to be a buyer. Clara, with her strategic gaze, quickly understood. The problem wasn't just training, it was vision. It was the absence of stories being shared and heard in that space. A lack of empathy turned into soulless protocol. How many times do companies claim to be human, yet forget to practice that at the most basic point of contact? The lesson here applies to everyone. Either you build a culture rooted in genuine respect, or prepared to lose customers and talent. Clara said nothing, but every one of her gestures was a mirror, and silently, she was already setting the next scene in motion. Monday arrived like any other, except for those in that meeting room. The lights went out, the screen lit up, and there it was. Clara, wearing a wrinkled dress and a worn-out backpack, walking through the store, being ignored, dismissed, made invisible. An awkward silence filled the room. It was like watching a corporate horror film, only with real people and real consequences. After showing the videos, Clara read aloud the notes she had written during her visit. Each line carried not only facts, but emotions. She described the indifferent looks, the mocking tone, the cold professionalism masking itself as service. And then, like someone delivering the final line of a powerful story, Clara revealed, "That woman in the footage is me." The revelation hit like lightning from a clear sky. No one saw it coming. But Clara knew. Sometimes the truth needs the element of surprise to leave a lasting mark. The impact was sharp, direct, and undeniable. She didn't raise her voice, didn't humiliate, didn't seek revenge. She simply revealed what her silence had already taught. And in the next moment, the wheel of change began to turn. Because a leader who observes also acts. It didn't take long. That same day, the store manager was dismissed. Clara didn't act out of vengeance, but out of responsibility. A culture cannot change if leadership keeps those who normalize the problem. HR was brought in urgently, not just to fill a position, but to rethink the entire recruitment and training process. The question was simple. Are we hiring based on resumes or on character? More than replacing people, Clara wanted to redefine standards. People with empathy, active listening, and real presence. That's what she was looking for. Because what's the use of filling a team with degrees if there's no humanity in how they treat others? Stories of prejudice in companies don't appear overnight. They're fed by neglect. And Clara decided to cut it at the root. Her actions surprised those who thought she would just give a slap on the wrist and move on. But Clara was never one to cover up mistakes. She cleaned the whole stain. And as new management guidelines were being defined, a new idea began to take shape behind the scenes. That's when Human Vision was born. An internal program not based on cold management books, but on the very stories the company had once ignored. Clara built the modules around real cases of prejudice, exclusion, and resilience. No generic motivational videos. She wanted employees to feel, even symbolically, what it was like to be treated with disregard. Only then could service shift from robotic to authentic. Every employee, from interns to directors, had to go through the modules. There were role-play simulations with undercover actors, intense empathy debates, and emotional workshops. Some cried, others were shaken by their own behaviors, and many, for the first time, realized that a company needs more than targets. It needs soul. And the most powerful part? At the end of each session, Clara would tell a new story from her own life, always anonymously. Only in the final session did she reveal that all the situations had happened within their own company. The reaction? A silence different from the meeting room. A silence of people who finally understood and were ready to change. But not everyone stayed. Months after Human Vision launched, testimonials began to emerge. Unprompted, unscripted, sincere. Former employees, now working elsewhere or restarting in new careers, sent anonymous messages to HR. Some admitted to judging clients by appearance. Others confessed to behaviors they once didn't even consider discriminatory. Now they saw clearly, and with regret. One of them shared that after the training, he started greeting everyone with the same enthusiasm, from the elderly woman with a cloth shopping bag to the man in a suit. He said the change was so noticeable that his colleagues began copying him. Another said he never again ignored an uncomfortable silence during a customer interaction, because he had learned that even in silence, there's a story asking to be heard. Stories that used to go unnoticed were now being honored. The most powerful transformations weren't at work. They were in people. Some said they started listening more attentively to their own children. Others began making eye contact with their mothers during dinner. One reached out again to a friend they had once dismissed as irrelevant. Clara always said, when a company truly changes, the outside world also changes, even if just a little. And this was only the beginning. With the first results of Human Vision, Clara realized it could no longer be just an internal project. It was time to show the world what the company had learned, through pain, courage, and above all, purpose. That's how the new customer service policy was born, shared on social media with a clear message. We don't sell clothes. We share stories with respect. The post went viral within hours. It wasn't marketing. It was a statement. The new policy made one thing clear. Empathy is not a differentiator. It's the baseline. The brand began training influencers in inclusive communication, redesigned store windows to reflect diversity, and even launched a campaign with former customers who had experienced poor service. It was an institutional shock of humility and an invitation to rebuild. The response was immediate. Emotional comments, returning customers, new audiences connecting with the cause. The company's stock even rose after the announcement, proof that when purpose is aligned, results follow. But Clara knew it couldn't stop there. What began as an internal shift was quickly becoming a public example. What began as a silent visit became a global protocol. Other branches, including those abroad, began to adopt the same surprise evaluation model. No prior notice, no staged performance, just regular people in regular clothes, living real experiences, and revealing what reports often overlooked. Clara, unknowingly, had set a new gold standard in organizational climate management. And the stories kept growing. At leadership conferences, her case became a benchmark. Renowned consultants started asking how to implement something similar in tech, healthcare, and education companies. Clara was invited to speak and share how a wrinkled dress managed to flip the mindset of an entire corporation. The thing is, she never talked about the dress itself. She always spoke about listening, about seeing, about what's left unsaid, and maybe that's what made the biggest impact. While many sought formulas, she offered presence. While others created manuals, Clara shared lived experiences. She was a leader who turned a common mistake, rushed judgment, into a quiet revolution. And she had one last thing to say, standing before her entire team in a packed auditorium. Clara took a deep breath and looked into every face before her. Most people lowered their gaze. Some tried to hide their discomfort. Then, with calm and clarity, she said, "It's not about clothes. It's about humanity." That sentence, as simple as her dress that day, made headlines. It went viral with the hashtag #ThoughtSchmear purpose-driven leadership and reignited conversations online about how companies should treat people, not like walking price tags. What's curious is that no one expected that from a CEO. They expected numbers, targets, charts. But Clara delivered truths. She showed that real leadership doesn't require a suit, just the sensitivity to spark transformation. And in that room, once filled with red tape, new stories were born. Stories that would now become part of the company's soul. And the most beautiful part? Other leaders, women, young professionals, previously invisible individuals, began drawing inspiration. Some decided to test their company culture in the same way, with simplicity and active listening. Because when a story touches you deeply, it doesn't end. It spreads. And Clara knew that was only the first page of a brand new chapter. How many times, without realizing, have you failed to truly see someone? How often has someone's appearance, the way they walked, the clothes they wore, or the silence they carried, made you judge them before knowing them? This question might feel uncomfortable, but it's necessary. Because the most powerful stories, the ones that change companies, relationships, and even destinies, often start with one common mistake: premature judgment. It's not just about appearance. It's about our tendency to label, to put people into boxes just because they don't fit into what we're used to. The problem is that when you choose not to listen, not to pay attention, or simply not to care, you shut doors. And sometimes, you miss the chance to live one of those stories that change everything. Maybe you've seen something like this happen. An employee being ignored in a meeting just because they speak softly. A woman being doubted because she arrived by bus. A simple man barely greeted at an event because he wasn't wearing a blazer. And in all these situations, one question lingers. Who are you failing to hear simply because of prejudice? These stories aren't rare exceptions. They happen every day. In restaurants, in corporate hallways, at hotel receptions, in job interviews. They even happen in your workplace, silently, but with devastating effect. And the saddest part is that many people don't even realize they're being toxic, arrogant, or pushing away talents, opportunities, and precious connections. The truth is simple and hard. The difference between a toxic environment and a human one lies in how we treat those we consider irrelevant. That quiet intern no one listens to. The cleaning lady who knows more about the company's culture than any director. The driver who hears everyone's complaints all day, but is rarely called by name. And here's the most surprising part. Some of the most powerful stories come from these very people. When they're given a voice, they bring innovation. When they're embraced, they show true loyalty. When they're respected, they inspire entire teams to do better. So the question remains, what are you going to do differently from now on? Do you have the courage to change your perspective, to propose a new way of living and working together, to build a space where everyone can be truly heard, not just tolerated? Can you be the person who starts a silent but deeply transformative change? A change that begins not with grand speeches, but with daily gestures. A sincere, good morning, a respectful look, active listening. It's not easy, because it requires inner revision. It requires humility. It means acknowledging you've probably made mistakes, and that's okay. What matters is what you do with that awareness now, because growth only comes with reflection. True connection only comes with empathy. If this content made you think, reminded you of someone you misjudged, or someone who surprised you in a good way after a first glance, don't let it pass unnoticed. Don't let the lesson fade. Share it. Reflect on it. Talk to someone about it. Because the stories we tell are mirrors, and sometimes all we need is to look at our reflection with more attention. And hey, if you've made it this far, maybe something inside you is already shifting. Maybe you're becoming the kind of leader, colleague, friend, or human being who transforms entire environments just by how you treat others. And that, believe me, is the greatest power anyone can have. Whether in the silence of a gesture or the firmness of an action, you can be the turning point in someone's life. And if someone has ever underestimated you, know this: the best stories are born from simplicity and blossom through resilience. Because those who've been doubted often learn to believe in others in ways no one else can. And that's why here, on this channel, we don't just want to tell beautiful stories. We want to spark real change. We want to touch the wound, but also show that healing is possible. We want to show that kindness is not weakness, it's strategy. That listening isn't a waste of time, it's emotional intelligence. That looking someone in the eye is still one of the greatest forms of respect. So if this video stirred something in you, triggered a memory, or made perfect sense, subscribe to this channel, turn on notifications, and above all, share it with someone who needs to hear this. Because there are still people who treat others based on appearances, and maybe, just maybe, they're waiting for you to show them a different path. Here, we'll keep bringing you those stories that inspire, but also challenge, that comfort, but also provoke. Because real transformation isn't about magic, it's about awareness, and the first step begins with you.